Hello, everyone. Books with Banks back again. I'm so pleased to be joined by my three wonderful guests. How are you guys doing today?
Very
Good,
nice.
good.
Yep. Happy to be
Awesome.
here.
All
Same.
right. Today we're going to be having a discussion about difficulty in Malazan and some of the pieces, some of the places, maybe character arcs that we found perhaps the most challenging to work through, to visualize, to understand the themes. Really, we can be interpreting the word challenging in a wide variety of ways. Before we do that, though, just real quick, if you guys want to go around and introduce yourselves, just in case someone's watching this who isn't familiar with your channels, uh, in whatever order.
I'm Philip Chase. Uh, Philip Chase of Bets of Fantasy.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm Shay from the channel Zachary Shay.
I'm David from Four Corners of the Page. I make inane, rambly nonsense, and I appreciate you all.
Thanks, guys. Thank you all for doing that. So yeah, a bit of the explanation of like why I wanted to do this video, this discussion. I had been thinking about difficult parts in these books and what I thought of being the most challenging. And I even made a post on Reddit, just kind of casting a wide net, seeing what other people thought were their most challenging sections. And then I saw this wonderful discussion that David, that you did with Joanna on her channel, and I'll have that, I can link that video down below, where you were both talking about just challenging books in general. And there was a segment of that conversation that you kind of devoted to Malazan. And so that just really kind of gave me the motivation to say, oh, yeah, sure, this would be a great chat to have or to host. And yeah, I'm really happy to have such a wonderful group of friends to have this discussion with. And I'm hoping that our discussion of these challenging moments will be more a celebration of where Malazan is difficult for a lot of people. Just because there's so much discussion online about is it actually as difficult as people say, or is it maybe not so difficult? Is it too much of a barrier to entry? Some people say it's like the Everest of fantasy. Um, but if it is those things, if it is that difficult, I think it's better to look at it as like as an exciting challenge to overcome as opposed to a daunting, like intimidating, oh, I'm never going to be smart enough to understand this. We all talk about Malazan all the time, and we're going to talk about several moments in these books that we don't maybe necessarily understand. Um, so yeah, without any further ado, we'll just kind of go around, and each of us will say the section that we selected, and then we'll all just kind of talk about each of those parts. Is there anyone that wants to go first? Maybe you're worried someone's gonna steal um, your section.
I guess I can go
Okay.
first
All
if
right,
if
go
no
for it,
one wants
Shay.
to.
Go for it.
All right.
Oh, wait, sorry. Real quick, spoilers for all things Malazan, because I think we have a few moments or plot lines that come from not just Book of the Fallen, but also novels of Malazan Empire, maybe Carcanis. So yeah.
If it helps, mine is going to be from the Malazan Book of the Fallen,
Okay.
Mine too.
specifically from House of Chains. Is that where it was? Yeah, I think
Okay.
so.
Okay.
So I'm the only problem child pulling from the non-10 big books. Um, well, first I just want to say that most of my like difficulty with Malazan, it's like in the moment I find some passages difficult, but usually once the plot line is concluded, I get some clarity on that. It's not a lot of them that I have to like go look on Reddit and be like, "Wait, what?" Usually I'm like, "Oh, I'm not like, what?" But there's a couple that I was like, "What?" And one of those was the ending of Stonewielder. A lot of the stuff with Greymane, I was a little in the dark about. And let me minimize this real quick and see if I can pull up the Reddit page. But I went on the Malazan subreddit. Uh, Let me see. Forum Malazan Empire.
Mhm.
and they had that question asked about the ending of Stonewielder, and there is a Reddit page on the ending of Stonewielder, and that kind of like helped me because I was kind of in confusion about like what happened to Greymane
Hmm.
and a lot of the stuff with the what are they called again? The like the ones that come in from the sea, like those like
Storm Riders
Yeah,
or
Storm
the
Riders,
Mhm.
yeah. Oh,
storm riders. Yeah. But I was kind of in confusion about some of that, and I still, maybe it's because it's been a while since I've read Stonewielder. That one is still kind of fuddled in my mind, but I remember after going onto the Reddit, I was kind of just like, oh, okay. Um, I still understood like the character arcs of Greymane and Kyle and some of our other characters within the narrative, but overall, I wasn't entirely sure what happened to Greymane.
okay.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Um,
struggling to remember much of the end of that book
so
myself
he's
anymore.
at the end of Stonewielder. Greymane is beneath the water, and
Okay.
he's
Mm.
you can see the like the silhouette of him or whatever, deep, deep beneath the water. Is he
Okay.
dead or not? Essentially, Shay, is that what you're getting at? Is he gone? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I assume he is dead now.
So I think you're actually onto something that is deliberately ambiguous and I think maybe you could say I would lean more toward, yeah, he's probably dead, but it's left a little open, isn't it? Which is
Mhm.
where your confusion is coming from, and where I think there can be some debate. So it seems to me that that's a typical Malazan trick, if you
Yeah.
will, that these two guys seem to relish in ambiguity often. So your reaction is, in a way, not the word correct is not maybe the right word I'm looking for here, but your reaction is legit here because I feel like it's not entirely clear that he's dead. Like if Ian Esselmont wanted to write another book with Greymane in it and explaining how he got out of that, I would buy it,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
You know, so I think that it's in that category of probably, but maybe not. And that's a Malaz ambiguity that we just have to learn to live with.
Would you say it's kind of like a similar deal to like well, I guess we have more clarity on it because the series went on, but it's kind of similar to what happened with Bedict
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
at the
Yeah.
end of Midnight Tides.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mm.
Exact. Good
That's a really
comparison.
good parallel. I hadn't thought about that parallel. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Yep.
that I was just thinking about what we were talking about. I'm like, wait, these guys have done this before. And I thought of Midnight Tides, the end of that one. I'm like,
Which gets into the whole issue of when you're dead in Malazan, are you dead?
Right.
And the accusation on the part of some people who are a little more critical of this is that, oh well, I don't feel like there's as much impact if a character dies in Malazan because they might come back, blah blah blah. My take on that is you don't come back the same if you
Right.
come back,
Hmm.
right? You come back not the same person, right? No matter what the means is, whatever it might be, ascendancy or whatever it might be, or if you do oh, what's the guy who gets hugged too much in the third book by the great big uh,
Oh, cock. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
if you come back like him, he comes back multiple times and gets
Yeah.
horribly tortured every single time. Yeah. Talk the younger.
Mhm.
Um, you know,
Tattersail. She never comes back the
Tattersail.
same.
Yeah.
No, I mean,
Yeah.
in fact, there are multiple souls in the form that she comes back in. So yeah, my take is that Greymane could theoretically come back. Wouldn't be the same, probably,
Mhm.
having undergone that form of death, if that's what it is. But yeah. I don't know. What does anyone else think about it?
I think it's as soon as you said it, Shay, I was like, that is such a good one. It was such a good one. And I resent you for having taken that. Just kidding. I think part of I would agree with you largely. I kind of got to the last 10% of Stonewielder and I was a little bit fuzzy on some of the details. And I think, Philip, you're absolutely right that a lot of that fuzziness is deliberate and intentional on the part of Esselmont. I think also part of the reason that it's left a little bit tricky to work out, intentionally tricky, is also that the Storm Riders motivations are a little bit unclear for. I mean, what is it? Is it which book is it? Is it Knight of Knives, the epilogue of Knight of Knives, where they correct me if I'm wrong here. I could be way off. They find like a storm rider washed up on a beach,
Yeah.
Correct.
and the line of the storm rider who's dying goes, "Why are you persecuting us?" or "Why are you killing us?" Something like that. And that confusion, I think, rides
Uh-huh.
all the way through, pun intended, rides all the way through Stonewielder because you're trying to work out who is the enemy here and where is this conflict even coming from? Because we have that epilogue from Knight of Knives just going on in our head, and that's kind of what was kind of percolating in my brain as I was listening to this conversation. I don't know if you guys had some obscurity with the Storm Riders as you were reading Stonewielder as well.
Yes.
Yep.
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
Completely.
Yeah.
Good
Yeah.
call, I would say. Yeah.
And especially in near the end of Book of the Fallen with their armor or someone wearing their armor, that's a little odd too, or a little confusing as
Yeah.
well.
That is impressive that you remember that from Night of Knives. Same with Joanna
The
in our
book
other discussion when she brought up the epilogue of it makes me realize like, do I remember this series as well as I think I do? Because if you were to ask me, I'd be like, yeah, I remember most of the big points. I had no recollection of that Storm Rider at the end of Night of Knives.
Hmm.
the Storm Riders' motivations, they were carrying a piece of the Crippled God. Is that right? Am I remembering that correctly?
I think they were trying to get at the piece of the crippled god.
That was the goddess
Yes, yes,
of
yes.
of that of that continent. Yeah.
Yeah, on the what's that, Corelry or
Yeah.
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 Corelli. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
And
that
I think
moment in Night of Knives that David was talking about is that he's discovered by a couple kids who then bring their grandfather, and he's just washed up on the beach. I don't know if that's jarring your memory or not.
Yeah, yeah. It's bringing it back to me.
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like a microcosm of a lot of what happens at the end of Malazan Book of the Fallen, where it's only when you reach that final page that you kind of have understood a lot of what has preceded, because suddenly a lot of not all of them, but a lot of the pieces suddenly slot together, and you go, "Oh, this is what was going on in the background." I mean, kind of like Thavora, although her motivations you could maybe argue are still a little bit left hazy. It's my
Mhm.
point is that you get to the end, and it's only at the end you kind of realize what was kind of happening on in those steps previous, which is a remarkable skill to pull off as a writer or writers in this case.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of want to say like I love this that kind of maybe a through line of this conversation is or of this conversation can be that intentional ambiguity that both authors leave in their books because I can just envision someone who says, "Oh, I'm the expert on all things Malazan. I've puzzled it all out. I've figured it all out." They sit down to talk with either Esselman or Erickson. They give their theory and their conclusions, and both of them, I just envision them just sitting there nodding and going, "Huh, that's interesting. I never thought about it like that," or something like
Yeah.
that. Like,
Yeah.
like yeah,
I think if you think you've figured out Malazan, you have overestimated your. I mean, you missed the point in a way,
right,
haven't you?
right, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is somewhat tangential. I remember one of my poetry professors in uni telling me the story. I think it was Robert Frost who used to go into people lecturing on his poetry and sit in the back of the auditorium, rightly or wrongly, and just kind of go, "That was incorrect. You didn't understand this bit," which it could be completely apocryphal, but I always enjoyed that story. I think there's maybe a slight parallel here. But I think do you mind me just following up on something you said at the beginning there, Shay, as well, which I thought was really interesting. Because I'm not saying this in any way to kind of be combative, because I do the same thing, but I find it really interesting that you finish the book, and what is the first thing we do in that situation is we go to Reddit to work out what we've just read.
Mhm.
And this is something that I do a lot. And actually, when we get to me, it's part of the reason that I had the difficulty I did. Um, it's something that is such an impulse, isn't it? That when we have something that feels obscure or ambiguous or just challenging, we
Right.
want to go onto the internet forums and find out if we're correct. Would that be the right way of putting it?
Yeah.
About our
Right.
interpretation of what happened. I think that's an
I know
interesting point to raise.
for myself, I'm not like, for instance, if I watch like an A24 film like Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, ending is purposefully vague I'm not going looking for a definitive ending of what happened. I'm more just like looking for the tools to help me with my own deliberation of what happened.
Mm,
So like yes, like with Stonewielder, it is left up in the open, and I recognize that on some level, but I still need like I know that there are people on the internet that have more tools than myself for helping me deliberate whether or not which side of the vague which side my own headcanon takes for this vague up in the air, scenario. Specifically,
yeah,
like with Greymane in this, but there's a ton of other instances in fiction where things are left open-ended, and I'm like, I need more research. So, yeah, that is especially when something is left intentionally vague. That is my first resource is to hop on the old Reddit.
yeah,
Or the
So I'm
Malazan wiki. Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
It's really good.
yeah.
The Malazan wiki is phenomenal.
Yeah.
So
I have.
I'm glad we're kind of talking about this right now because yeah, I would also love to hear from all of you as we go through these moments. What tools, resources like Reddit or the wiki you relied on to clarify things. And I think you've done a really nice job already, Shay, kind of explaining the process that you used, specifically with the Greymane example. But are there any other tools or any other resources?
While I do use Reddit quite a bit, the Malazan forum, like its own dedicated forum, has a lot of really passionate fans that like, and granted, as we've discussed, like not everybody's going to get the series completely right, but they are like, pretty eagle-eyed,
Yeah.
even for like the non-main 10 book series. Like they're pretty on it about Path to Ascendancy, Carcanus.
Mm.
So that is a very useful tool. Philip and AP, their videos are also extremely helpful. Didn't watch them like my first half through the series, but like in my second half, when those videos were out there and on YouTube, they became very helpful, and not necessarily in finding like specific things to fix, but like just hearing overall thoughts on different narratives and different things that I may not have picked up on the first time. So all
Okay.
are useful tools.
Oh,
Mhm.
thank you.
I
Oh,
think maybe there's a distinction when I'm looking at stuff online between looking for understanding and looking for analysis. So very often I think YouTube is brilliant for. I mean, there's a few kind of explanation Malazan videos on YouTube. I think a lot of what the YouTube side of things does really well, and I would say it did this even before Malazan has started to maybe get more traction. I mean, I know Alex, you just put out a video on kind of academia and Malazan, but I think even before that, the YouTube discussions there was probing, there was analysis that's really helpful and brilliant, and of course Philip and AP's discussion being some of those videos. For me, when I'm going for understanding, like what is literally happening on the page right now, I'd now try and just sit with it for a little bit and just see if the dust settling helps. I'm going to talk about when we get to my shot. I'm going to be talking about the Malazan reread of The Fallen that happened on
mhm.
Tor.com back in the day because that was really helpful for me in understanding what was going on. And I would agree with the Malazan wiki, although things have been spoiled for me by the Malazan wiki, not because of the wiki, because of me, because I'm an idiot. So, for example, I had Whiskey Jacks. I don't know if I've ever said this. I had Whiskey Jack's death spoiled for me at the end of Dead House Gates
Oh
because I was
no.
just checking something, and then that line just says deceased or something like that, and I'm like. "Oh." So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I think you have to be really careful with some of these online resources because you can find yourself having spoiled something very significant without even realizing that it's happened. But yeah, the wiki is very effective, I think, and that reread of The Fallen on Tor.com, now Reactor, I think it's called, was really instrumental for me.
Yeah. Isn't it Memories of Ice where he dies though?
Yeah, yeah. I
Yep.
was I was just Googling something. I think I was like,
You were in
I think
Deadhouse Gates when you
they
Googled it.
mentioned Whiskey Jack, Quick Ben and Kalam, I think they say things are falling apart over here, and I'm like, wait, who's who? And I very quickly went online and immediately. But it happens, and it was also kind of my fault, I think, for immediately running to the digital resource.
Yeah. There are lots of
Yeah.
great channels that are out there that have been making really great Malazan content. And one of my favorites is Ruth and Bad.
Yeah.
Mm.
He's very consistent, but he's brilliant, and I hope his channel's still there. I haven't visited in a while, but it's just he does really cool deep dives into whatever topic he wants, and he's completely like full spoilers with every single video. So don't look at his videos unless you have read the entire. Like he'll just go wherever he wants, but mostly he talks about Malazan Book of the Fallen. But yeah, he's a great example. But there are just some yeah, it's really helpful to have people do their deep dives and stuff like that. But for just little tidbits and little facts like there's so much to all these series that I can't remember. If I need a little reminder, I will use the Malazan wiki just to read the summary. Oh yeah, that, and then it'll jar my memory and yeah. Uh,
Usually with like booktube content, it's less of like answering questions I have at the forefront of my mind and more just like making me reanalyze. Alex, I thought your just to call you out, your Reaper's Gale video was like very well structured.
Thank you.
I will admit, like sometimes when things are a little bit more difficult for me to piece out within the text, I just kind of like I just kind of forget about it. Like a lot of the stuff with Reaper's Gale, the Letheri stuff, it was very vague in my mind aside from like the bug puzzle. You
Hmm.
know, like I remember that one because the conclusion of that was kind of funny. But so much of the characterization of those different Letheri officials just completely went over my head. So, that was a supplemental tool that helped me like go back and think about something that maybe because I found it difficult to get what Erickson was going for in the moment, I just kind of glossed over it. Um,
Okay.
so yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And even, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I remember Ericsson, around the time he was writing The God Is Not Willing, put up a Facebook post saying, "Can anyone help me here? I think I'm blanking on
Yeah.
the name of a certain character." Something like
oh yeah,
that.
And
you couldn't remember if a certain character was dead or not.
Yes.
He needed help from his fans to remember.
Was that the one
Wait, did
who
I kill
found
this character?
Karsa's son in The God Is Not Willing?
Yes,
The
yes.
yeah,
yeah,
Damask,
yeah.
yeah, or Damask.
I'm blanking on his name, but when I was reading The God Is Not Willing, I'm like, have I seen that? He's talking like I've seen this person before.
Yeah.
And
You've
House of
seen
Chains
him
was
in
so long
House of
ago.
Chains. Yep. Yep. Yep.
I,
I
I think
love I
he.
love what he did with that character.
Oh,
Oh,
me too.
same.
Yeah,
Too.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
I think he even posted. It must have been when he was working on God Is Not Willing as well, but he posted something on Facebook along the lines of, "Anyone who knows the Warrens much better than me, do you have any creative ideas for what Warren's Icarium might have made?"
That's my point I made when we had our other discussion.
Yes, I was just thinking about
They
that.
don't
Yeah.
know about what the hell these
Right,
things
right.
are, you know?
I
Yeah.
thought it was funny when I was watching his interview with David. You were like, what do you think about Malazan makes it so evergreen? People are constantly returning to it. And he's like, I haven't reread them. I was like, oh, what a
I
G.
forgot about
Like,
that. Yeah.
he's like, I haven't reread them. I was like, okay, okay.
Yeah. And I love he also mentioned recently that part of the, I guess, slower writing pace for Walk in Shadow is due to how he has to, because it's been a while, he has to really go spend a decent amount of time reviewing and kind of coming to grips with what he was working through or working on in that book. So he is at least he has at least gone back to Fall of Light just to make sure there's, I guess, some cohesion there with Walk in Shadow.
I
AP will
don't mean
sort him
to.
out.
Sorry, Philip.
Oh, I just said AP will sort him out, I'm sure.
Philip, I was going to ask you a question. I don't want to spin us off on a long tangent, but just talking about authors rereading their own work. Have you reread
Oh,
your work since publication?
I've listened to Alan narrate The Way of
okay,
Adan.
okay.
So
Hmm.
you could say I reread it in that sense, but I read those books more than 20 times when I was
Yeah.
revising them. So they're they're pretty much branded into my soul. So, I don't know. I probably Steven Erickson did not need to revise as many times as I did. So yeah, and his series is much longer, to be fair. So he might be a little fuzzier, and it's been a longer time since he published them. So yeah, he's probably fuzzier on the details than I am. But yeah, I can imagine if I had that much of a catalog of published books that I would get pretty fuzzy on the details after a certain number of years, probably. But yeah, in my case, I have less to deal with than he does. So yeah.
So I want to tie it back just real quick before we move on to someone else, but to Greymane specifically, and maybe not specifically the moment you mentioned Shay, but just do you have any other thoughts on the character himself or how he's used in both series, but I guess really more in Esselmon stuff? Any further thoughts like that his story ending in that ambiguous way in Stonewielder? I guess what does that do for you or do for your enjoyment of his books?
I will. I don't know because Novels of the Malazan Empire is a very different beast from the Book of the Fallen. You know, you can't really like for as large and sweeping as the cast is in Book of the Fallen, you can latch on to certain characters that carry you through the series. Whereas Novels of the Malazan Empire, aside from like Kiska or Kyle, it's
Right.
really just different characters every time around. And while we did have Greymane in Return of the Crimson Guard, you kind of know within Novels of the Malazan Empire that these characters' journeys are going to be a little bit more short-lived.
Yeah.
I'd be interested in going back and reading that and seeing how it hits on an emotional level after reading, because I'll be honest, was it Forge of the High Mage or Kellanved's Reach? But the one that Greymane was in, uh,
Gambit's Reach, yeah. Or I think
Kellanved's
so.
Reach,
Yeah.
I did not think it was as brilliant as Dead House Landing and Dancer's Lament. Still a good book, but I thought that Greymane's story arc was one of the standout the sections of Kellanved's Reach.
Yeah.
Um, so I'd be interested in reading that a second time around with the added context. But as far as what the character did for me, um, I enjoyed Greymane's character. I definitely want to see more of him and see how that whole conclusion of Stonewielder panned out, but I think I probably won't get that.
Okay.
Uh, so yeah, I guess I've come
Okay.
to terms with it.
Good.
Well,
Forgive me for looking down at my phone. I'm just I'm trying to find. I remember there being a very interesting line, and I'm going to have to just make it ambiguous for now and look it up later. But I remember Greymane having some really interesting final lines as he's basically by himself in this potentially doomed scenario. And I was just trying to look it up right now really quickly as you were talking, Shay. But I remember that final scene with Greymane. I was going to say quite clearly, clearly not clearly enough. But enough for it to have some resonance with me. So I might look up that final section later on and maybe put it in the comments or something if I could find the time.
yeah. If no other comments on that, then we'll move on to David or Philip. No?
I'm happy going next, Philip.
Go
Yeah.
for it.
Go for
Okay. So I've cheated
it.
as I want to do, and I've chosen a whole book. And the reason I was talking about the Tor reread earlier. So the first time I read Malazan Book of the Fallen, I read those 10 books first before moving on to novels of the Malazan Empire. Is my recollection. And I was reading it alongside the Tor reread. So again, Tor put out this chapter by chapter summary with these two amazing contributors. Forgive me, Amanda Rutter and Bill Capossera, I think their names were. And every week or every 2 weeks, they would read a chapter or two of a Malazan book, both novels of the Malazan Empire and Malazan Book of the Fallen. I think they also dipped into other books as well. And they would have the chapter summary. They would have Amanda's thoughts as a first time reader, and then they would have Bill's comments as a second time reader. And so it was this really wonderful sort of almost buddy read in a sense because you got some the basic synopsis of what you just read, and then you had someone in the same boat as you trying to work it out, and then you have someone a bit more experienced holding your hand and saying something along the lines of, "Listen, just wait, just hang on. This is supposed to be unclear X, Y, Z." And for me, when I reread Malazan Book of the Fallen for the first time, I had never read anything quite like it. I read Song of Ice and Fire, and then I'd read The Dark Tower. And that was kind of my adventure into kind of adult fantasy at the time. And then I moved on to Malazan Book of the Fallen. So I was struggling. I was finding it quite challenging at points. And it's interesting, just as a side tangent, Amanda said when they wrapped up the 10 books of Malazan Book of the Fallen, she said, "I'll be honest, it was only later on, like halfway through Gardens of the Moon, that I really started enjoying myself because there is this slight struggle, and maybe we can talk about that later." But the reason I bring this up is I got past their updates.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I started when they were about halfway through book 8. I read Malazan Book of the Fallen, and I wrapped up book 9, Dust of Dreams, at the same time as these two. And so I went into the Crippled God And my answer is going to be the Crippled God, as my answer to this prompt, because the stabilizers came off,
Yeah.
right? It was just me and the book, and I no longer had these wonderful pair online to kind of help me with it. And the Malazan community was there, but it wasn't quite as finely detailed with you can find an answer to anything, I feel like these days, at least some kind of an answer. And
Mhm.
so I basically went into this book by myself for about however long it is, 1100 pages. And I did struggle with it. And I'm not saying that as a negative. Please understand me. I'm not saying I hated my experience with this book whatsoever. I had a magnificent experience with this book. Yet at the same time, there were certain things where I just had to go, I don't have my Bill and Amanda with me. I have to just work this out myself or move on or take a break and just see how it goes. So there were a few things actually in The Crippled God that I basically, I'll be honest with you, really struggled to understand the first time through. The main one that kind of keeps coming up in my mind is the character of Gruntle, and particularly Gruntle's at the end of The Crippled God. I felt like I had a good, just to zoom in on one example, I felt like I had a good handle on who Gruntle was in book three and book eight. And I think he shows up in book nine a little bit.
Little.
But by the time he got to the end of book 10, I felt like I'd lost my grip on this character and what his motivations were and what he was doing, and ultimately why he died in the way that he did. And later on, I did have some tools, and maybe we can talk about this. And Erickson himself has commented on what he was doing with the character of Gruntle. But I remember at the time just having to go, I'm not sure I understand this, pin in it, reflect on it, and come back to it later. But I loved what you were saying, just to wrap up this like apparently monologue I'm giving you guys. I do apologize. But I'd like to wrap it up with what you were saying at the start, Alex, which is that grappling with complexity and not understanding something is sometimes, not always, but sometimes something to be celebrated. Ultimately, confusion is an aesthetic response, and it's very often one that the author wants you to have. And so I wouldn't actually have had my ending of book 10, reading Malazan Book of the Fallen, any other way. I found it in some ways that read the most rewarding of all. So that's my answer. It's The Crippled God, all 380,000 words of it.
You mentioning Gruntle, I have a very shameful admittance here, but I operated under some super wrong assumptions with one character, Grub. I thought Grub was the reincarnation of Coltane for way too long. Like, I don't know why my brain went there. I thought that for like 5 books. And even though I was getting nonstop evidence that that was not the case, I was like, nope, that's Coltane. Like, I'm Coltane right here. And it was so off. Like it was so bad. And then like I like into the crippled god. Like this wasn't something I realized in like House of Chains. Like this was in the crippled god. I'm like, oh, that's the years don't even line up. I don't know why my brain went there, but
Wishful thinking. You wanted Coltane to be back.
yeah, yeah. And we got that at the end of Dead House Gates, you have all that, but then
Right.
like Grub was 5. So you can't be reincarnated into a 5-year-old.
I mean,
So
you
I'm
could
like,
in Malazan. You could
Right,
in.
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
Shay knows my absolutely egregious misreading of Gardens of the Moon, which I will share with you very briefly. I thought that Whiskey Jack and Mallet, the first time I read that book, were lovers.
Oh,
Because
interesting.
and this is before Corlett is introduced, I believe, or as a love interest for Whiskey Jack. Mallet keeps saying to Whiskey Jack throughout that book, "You need some rest. Come with me, and I'll help you. I'll basically I'll give you comfort." And so I kind of went, okay, so those two are having their thing going on, and it's only when I got to Memories of Ice, I'm like, oh, I totally misread that situation. But I think we all have these things that we get slightly awry. That's my point.
Imagine Erickson watches that and he goes, "No, no, there were undertones of that in the." Like he's like, somebody finally picked up on the
Right.
homoerotic undertones of Whiskey Jack and Mallet.
I would like that. Yeah,
So
next time I
wholesome.
go through that book, I'm gonna look at that. Yeah.
What do you think about my experience with the Crippled God?
So I think I agree that I don't know if it would be my vote for most complicated book like overall, but it would be close. And I think part of it would have been close, especially the first time that I did it tackled it, because
Mhm.
I opted for the once you get to Midnight Tides, start bouncing around, doing like one Esselmont, one Erickson. And so then when I got to the Crippled God, it had been so long since I was with some of these characters. So I was like, wait, who's Setok again? Who's she with? And Torrent was in Reaper's Gale, right? But was he in Dust of Dr and like it was like just because it had been so many of these like stop, start kind of going back and forth, I think that really kind of hampered my experience to the point where even though like it to a sort of do as I say, not as I did kind of thing, where if someone asks me if they think they should do that, I would almost recommend they don't do it. I mean, maybe I'd recommend
Mhm.
read Knight of Knives whenever you want, see if you like that style and see if you think you have the kind of focus and stamina to keep up that pace of bouncing back and forth. I
Mhm.
personally did not, so that definitely made um those last few books a lot more challenging for me. And yeah, so when we got to Gruntl's stuff and when he's in the refugium with Kalava and the gate to Starville Demoline, I was like, wait, why is she in the refugium? Like even stuff like that was a little tricky for me to go back and remember.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Or even what the Malazans were doing in terms of trying to defend the crippled god there at the end, and what,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Mhm. I mean, even
I
the refugium as a sorry, Shay, as
oh
a
no, you're fine.
concept, I think quite difficult to grapple with as well. That was another one that the first
Mm.
read through, I was trying to continually work out exactly pinpoint what was going on there, which is maybe not the point. But sorry, Shay, I interrupted you.
Oh no, you're fine.
Yeah.
I agree. And what I was gonna say before is I actually not to be contrarian, but I think I did the same thing, Alex. I went like I believe I went Midnight Tides, then Night of Knives, then Bone Hunters, then Return of the Crimson Guard, then Reaper's Gale, Toll the Hounds, then Orb Scepter Throne. And I can only speak to my experience reading the two series. Um, I think dividing it up helped me, but granted, I wasn't reading other things in between these. Like I was like straight up like second half of Malazan and most of those novels of the Malazan Empire, like reading straight through. And I think like a lot of if I'd gone 10 and then 6, I think by the time I would have gotten to Orb Scepter Throne, I would have forgotten a lot of the Darujhistan stuff. And then I really do think Blood and Bone works extremely well after Crippled God. Because
Mm.
you know, you have that whole like shard of the Crippled God
Right, right.
on that island of it starts with a J, some weird
Roku, yeah.
name. Um,
Yeah.
so I think that I mean I'd probably feel differently if I'd gone the other way about it, but I think more often people read 10 than 6. I think for me, I'd prefer supplementing between just because, and especially after Crippled God, there is some like emptiness that I felt. And I think Blood and Bone getting back into the world and then having it tie into, it was my understanding that the end of Blood and Bone is occurring at the same time as the Crippled God.
Yeah,
So,
well, yeah, because there's you have the streak, the green comets throughout Blood and Bone as well. Yeah, yeah,
So I think they're like pretty adjacent, like they're occurring simultaneously for the most part. So
The sale is later. Yeah.
yeah.
I think it's an interesting question. I think structurally, I mean, of course, they're both series are kind of in some ways wonderfully braided together, but I often do wonder if we kind of overstate that to the detriment of both series. I mean, like from and maybe this is a bit of a tangent, but like the reality is with Malazan Book of the Fallen, we kind of leave the Malazan Empire by the end of book six, and that's kind of what the climax of book six is that they're sailing away. Um, and at the same time, I think going for a straight run through the novels of the Malazan Empire is also extremely rewarding in its own right. I mean, characters like Forgive Me Shimmer, for example, seeing that kind of through line trajectory in one dollop and not having it kind of interspersed, I think can make for an equally rewarding read for both series. Although I do think kind of having them kind of chronologically back and forth is also a way to go. But I think different emphases depending on how you do it. Just don't read Forge of Darkness first.
Yeah.
Good, but
Philip, did you have thoughts on the bouncing back and forth reading or on Gruntle?
I didn't read the series in the correct order, publication order myself. I actually kind of went here and there and everywhere. I even talked about in my videos how I actually read uh, Path to Ascendancy, the three books that were out at the time before I read novels of the Malazan Empire.
Okay.
And I had a lot of Malazan veterans going like, "Oh, you can't do this because you won't get the little nods to so and so and this and that." And like, but it's like a two-way street, really.
Right, right.
If you read Path to Ascendancy first, you're going to recognize these characters later on in novels of the Malazan Empire as they're older. For me, I think you could go either way, actually. I think there's a lot more flexibility than sometimes some people make out. Like, oh, you have to read them in this order, or you're doomed. You'll never understand. Nah, I think it's fine. And I even actually talked once to Ian Esselman about it, and he agreed. Path to Ascendancy, I think, and I've been saying this for years, by the way, Path to Ascendancy is a great entry point into the Malazan world, in my opinion, especially as it's if you're somebody who's not thrilled about being thrown into Gardens of the Moon and being like, whoa, what is this? If you want to be a little more on your feet, when you start, then I think Path to Ascendancy is a great way to do it, actually. So I'm not one of those who's like, oh, you have to do it in this exact order or else it's not
Right, right.
genuine or whatever.
Mhm.
So I think there are multiple ways to do it. And ultimately all the series not only supplement each other, but they enhance each other.
Oh,
Yes.
The sum is greater than the parts, in my opinion, and I love how they do that. And I have to read them in the definite publication order at all, but that's one way to do it. That's a fine way to do it.
I guess Dead House Gates and Night of Knives could have mutually spoiled each other as well in that regards. Like
right, right.
Yeah.
the discussion of whether you're ruining one by doing another one first. I mean, the
Mhm.
reality
Yep.
is you get the same kind of reveal in both, and
Yep.
there's no wrong way of doing it.
Two-way street. Yeah.
Yep.
Are there any other specific characters or things you want to point out from the Crippled God that you think are fun challenges to discuss? Or
That's
you had
you know
mentioned the refugium just in general as a concept. We could talk about that a little bit if
I
you
mean, the
like.
refugium is one. I think also it's the fact that, and I think we've kind of had this conversation elsewhere, is that books, I would say 7 through 10, become a lot more. I wouldn't say a lot more introspective because that introspection is there in books 1 through 6, but they're certainly heightened, for especially books 8, 9, and 10. And so it was also for me trying to juggle the plot and what's happening on the page with the reflections from the various characters and honestly some concepts that I hadn't really considered before. And I think this goes back into Dust of Dreams as well. Like Dust of Dreams and this what I would call it very much a meditation on purpose and meaning out in both the metaphorical and literal desert. I find very compelling, but it's something that there's a lot of layers that I was kind of grappling with in books 9 and 10. Um, but again, and I know, Alex, that the Carcanus is, correct me if I'm wrong, your favorite part of the Malazan kind of universe as a
Oh
whole.
yeah, yeah, yes,
And I
easily.
think,
Yeah,
I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I would imagine part of that is because of that philosophical, introspective, character-based writing.
absolutely. Yes.
Yeah,
Wait, what's your favorite part? Sorry, I was.
Arcanas. Yeah.
Oh
Arcanus.
yeah, I love Carcanus.
Yeah.
That's what
yeah.
I thought you were talking about. Eh.
And I mean, I think even uh, super related to, I guess, the last few comments that you made.
Hmm.
All of the Carcana stuff in Dust of Dreams and the Crippled God, everything with the Shake, there's quite a lot of introspection there, specifically with Sandaleth and Yen Tovis, and about who gets to lead these people, who's yeah, I love all of that stuff. But yeah, I can definitely see, especially since those are characters that don't really, I mean, they're both in Midnight Tides briefly, but they really don't do that much until later in the series. So, just another piece of that crippled god all the introspection there, all the potential for confusion there. But I love it. Yeah.
Yeah, and one more thing if I could add in very quickly as well, maybe something that also made me challenged, again, positively challenged, is the fact that maybe this was the first time I'd read a series. I mean, I guess you could say Song of Ice and Fire does this too, but we bandy about this phrase kind of subversion of expectations, but there are things that happens in the Crippled God that happen in the Crippled God that, were not where, I guess, as a naive, more naive kind of younger person, where I would want them to go. And so just talking about certain characters, for example, like Karsa, has a role to play in the
Mhm.
Crippled God, but he barely doesn't show up. And part of you would kind of want Karsa on the Thunderdome at the end of book 10. You know what I mean? Kind of just battling people. Sandalath basically ends the novel in a cupboard or something, doesn't she? She flees, and she basically the novel ends with her up in her room, I think. And so I guess my point is there are various. I could get that wrong, but there are various kind of character beats. Another one would be Crocus, sort of,
Mhm.
barely materializing in the novel until the final few pages, is my recollection. And these are all wonderful narrative choices, but for someone who kind of wants to see that big climactic showdown, there's also kind of a re-expectation of what I was looking for at the time I first read Malazan from my fiction. And I think that was a really important thing for me personally to grow as a reader.
Cool. Oh,
Yeah.
nice.
I just threw the kitchen sink at you. I do apologize.
I mean, there are so many threads that are so loose at the end of Malazan
Yeah.
Book of Fallen, some of which get resolved in novels of the Malazan Empire. Some don't get resolved anywhere. And some are ambiguous, like there's a certain character who appears in a sale that might answer your questions about Crocus, actually. And
Hmm.
yeah, it's an interesting take on, I'll have to tell you about. It's sort of a I'll have to look it up again, but it's something that I talked about with AP. But anyway, um, yeah, it's something you have to just live with again. Is that, and I think that they're both authors are. That's kind of how they are. They're giving us these loose ends that no, we're not going to resolve this for you, and you have to. I mean, just be okay with that. As a Malazan reader, you have to be comfortable with just certain things remaining ambiguous, and that if you can't get used to that, then you're gonna have a hard time maybe with Malazan, I
Yeah.
think.
It's just kind of like life, isn't it? Like, how many goodbyes do we have with people are actually goodbyes? And how many times with the last time we see someone is just saying, right, see you in a week, or see you for coffee,
Right.
or let's
Yeah.
catch up sometime, or so it is resonant to life as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yep. Or maybe it wasn't a
Hmm.
sale. Maybe it was actually Orb Scepter Throne. Now that I think of it, I think it was Orb
I'm
Scepter Throne.
just, I'm
Yeah.
so fascinated because I have no idea what you're talking about, and I'm so
Yeah.
intrigued.
Could
Yeah.
someone help me real quick? What's the name of the High Mage? It's very major character. I'm completely blanking on
You mean
In
Taishren?
Taishren. Yes,
yeah.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I will say people talk about how they have conflicting feelings about how Esselmont writes a character, how Erickson writes a character. I love Erickson. I think Esselmont writes Taishren better. If we're talking about novels of the Malazan Empire versus Malazan Book of the Fallen, I think Taishren gets like I don't know if I'm satisfied with his characterization without reading novels of the Malazan Empire. So I think in a lot of ways, Esselmont picks up on a lot of things. Like, yes, you said you don't ever get a true goodbye, but I think the continuation of, like, say, the Darujhistan storyline in Orb Scepter Throne, I think Esselmont takes a lot of crumbs from Erickson and builds on to something that is a little bit more satisfying when looking at it as a whole.
Hmm.
It's Orb Scepter Throne.
Okay.
So
There's a
sounds
certain
really good.
character in this book that may be Crocus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I haven't heard this theory. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, is this where um um what's his name is going through the ruins?
Yeah, I believe if I'm remembering this, it's been a little while, so
Nancy.
apologies if I got this wrong. Auntie's there as well, but it's that thief Malachi. There are
Oh.
indications that his knives, he plays with the knives the same way. There are certain little hints here and there, and what is he doing there? Remember his relationship with oh God, what's her name?
Absalom.
Absalar?
Yeah.
Absalom.
Or
What was it he wanted to get for her? And what was he looking
Some
for in the
a
ruins?
flower or yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
Ah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I love that.
So, yeah, yeah. So you
also
might get
Orb
more
Scepter.
resolution to
Yeah.
Crocus's arc than you might have thought, you know.
I completely forgot that until you mentioned it. I also thought it was cool how Orb Scepter Throne was the first time you actually get mentions of the Gardens of the Moon. Like it kind of felt like that moment where they say the title of the movie, but they never
Yeah.
did that in Gardens of the Moon.
Yep.
I
Yep.
think Gardens of the Moon is mentioned in Gardens of the Moon, isn't it? Maybe I'm misremembering, like in an epigraph or something. But I could be mistaken.
But it's definitely tied into the Crocus and Apsalar thread
Yeah,
in many
yeah.
places, and of course it comes up again in here. So yeah,
This is a perfect example of kind of like the moments or the sections of these books that I'm excited that we can talk about and
yeah.
puzzle over and scratch our heads. Like this is what's fun about Malazan, I think. To
You're always rediscovering things
Yeah,
you didn't
yeah.
realize were there. Yeah, yeah.
So
Can I
I
add in?
thought
Sorry,
the
I'll
same about Crocus and Orb Scepter Throne, but I think I went on a Reddit and somebody's like, "No, it couldn't be because of this, this, and this," and I was like, "Maybe I was wrong," but now you're validating some of my
Uh,
suspicions, so I need to look more into that.
Yeah,
and also
Mike.
be people who think they figured out the Malazan timeline.
Right, right, yeah.
yeah.
If someone's theory or conclusion is because of the timeline and what time of year it was, I automatically don't know that I really buy it because we know that the authors don't really care that much about the timeline. So,
Exactly.
So
yeah,
Grub is Coltane. No.
there you go.
There you go.
One other point of confusion I had just very quickly, if you don't mind me throwing it in, is a Carcanis one, and I thought about bringing it up, but I don't want to appear like too much of a moron. But there is something that I'm constantly confused by Carcanis, and also the series isn't wrapped up, so maybe this will become more obvious later on. Is Carcanis in the Carcanis trilogy more closely aligned with the Malazan mundane world than like they don't seem like two separate realms to me. The
Oh, it's a
Carcana stuff
different
seems like
world, I think. That's the way I read it. It's a different world.
Yeah,
there's certain moments in Carcanis that almost seem like they're happening in Wu at the same time. I need to double check this, but I don't know if this is just something that I'm pulling out of the ether.
Carol Gillane in Carcanis really confuses me because we're seeing so many of the ancient races within the main world of Malazan Book of the Fallen. Like the dog runners or whatever are Talani Moss, it feels like.
Yes.
And then you have what feels like the precursors of the Teblors. You have um, a lot of those elements that I was not expecting to see in Curl Gillane after finishing the Books of the Fallen, not at all. So I was
Yeah.
kind of confused. I was like, and so many of the Azathanai are in this other realm. So,
so
and
I've
then,
always read it as its own different world, and the Azathanai, because of the Civil War, ravaged Corald Galen to such a horrific extent. And I mean, even before that, the wars with the Assail did a lot of damage too. Um, and with the approaching or like the Lightfall getting closer and closer to the city,
yeah.
and I guess whatever happens at the end of Walk in Shadow, my suspicion is a lot of these Azathanai. Well, I guess I had always kind of imagined when there's magic at play and when they're experimenting around in Karul's new warrens, they access a way to, or they find a way to access the world of Wu or the main
Yeah.
main world, and
Mhm.
they use that world as some of their battleground. So that's why you have and I guess that's where like the Kachane, Tramal, and stuff come into
Yeah.
conflict. And so some of the prologues could be like in Book of the Fallen might be in Wu instead of Corral Galen or vice versa. But then yeah, and then I think like with the dog runners, I think Olar Ethel and she's we could do a whole
Mhm.
I'm
Yeah.
confused about her. But I
And Burn is in Carol Gillane. That's the one that really, I was
Yes.
like, the sleeping
yeah,
Okay,
goddess.
thank you for bringing all these up because yeah, you're
yeah.
articulating exactly what I was failing to do.
Burn and Carol Gillane was the one that threw me for the biggest loop. I guess
Yeah.
because, especially the way she's described, she's so like entrenched within the earth of the world. Like she's got like all these roots around her and stuff. And I'm like, how do
Right.
you get dropped in the other world? But I
Oh,
guess,
right, at the end of Forge of Darkness, what's his face finds her in the forest, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
It's
it's confusing.
I guess like for me, Midnight Tides, the prologue of Midnight Tides, to give an example, feels like a migration. It's like a race of people having entered this new world where, for example, the Kachin Shamal are the status quo. But as Shay, thank you. You beautifully articulated what I was not doing. There's so many elements in Carcanis that seem to feed into what we know of as Wu. But I do think, Alex, as well, your interpretation is potentially the valid one. I guess we'll just have to wait and find out. But there's so many things I've got a question mark over in that
Yeah,
series that I'm
yeah.
really excited to see where it goes, as I'm sure we're all in agreement over.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, if no other comments on that, then we'll move on to Philip.
Okay, yeah. So I have something I wanted to bring up, something that I actually have been wanting to discuss with people. So this is perfect, and it's not really so much a matter of comprehension as a moral question
Okay.
that Malazan raises, and I think, of course, deliberately so. I think that Stephen Erickson and Ian Esselmont are both authors who want us to think. I mean, one of the main things that great authors do, and I consider both of them to be great authors, is they get you to think about the nature of things like compassion and redemption and other connection and other great themes that Malazan analyzes from all kinds of different angles. And my issue is to do, I think, a bit with the idea of redemption. There are certain characters that it seems to me when I hear people talk about them, there's an amount of forgiveness once you realize their background or how things turn out. You could even put even the crippled God in that category, where I think by the end of it all, we feel for the crippled God to a great degree because of what was done to him, how he was dragged to this world by the elder gods and used and essentially in a parasitic way and that made him into an embittered soul who did all these horrible things. But he's given us this wonderful book, so we kind of like him, and he did suffer a lot, so we understand where he's coming from. But he did some horrible things, and not only did he do horrible things, but he inspired other people to do horrible things. I guess I could focus this conversation into one character. And this is a character where I don't see much sympathy. I don't see any talk of redemption. I don't see, in fact, I feel like when people when this character gets his comeuppance, I think most readers sort of retreat into our eye for an eye morality mode, instead of, oh, well, he had a bad childhood or whatever. Even though, so the character I'm talking about, and I think Alex has already guessed, is Bidithal. Nobody likes Bidithal. Are there any Bidithal fans out there? I mean, what he did, he appears first in Deadhouse Gates, and then he's in primarily in House of Chains. But he's the priest guy who mutilated girls, in Felison's camp there. Um,
Mhm.
Horrible individual. I don't know anybody who likes him. Okay, and I'm not on Team Bidithal here or anything, but. It is even said, I think in the Bone Hunters, Hiboric says something to the effect that, yeah, he was being prompted by the crippled god to do this because the crippled god's all about mutilation and all of that. That was he was that's what was all about. And that being the case, nobody stops and says, "Oh, well, he was being inspired to do this by someone else. It wasn't entirely of his own agency." It said, "No, it's Bidithal's horrible. He got what was coming to him, and when Karsa rips his balls off, we're all like witness,
Yeah.
right?"
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like, wait, how come we're not consistent on this, right? It's more of
Mhm.
an emotional response when we talk about Bidithal, and we're all like, "Yeah, go Karsa," and we hate this guy because of what he did. But what I wrestle with is a person like Bidithal redeemable in any way, shape, or form? Was it his, how much of this can we lay at his feet? And this is something that I think Erickson wants us to wrestle with, frankly. I don't have a neat, pat answer to this from a moral standpoint, but I wondered what your thoughts are on Bidithal as a specific example of a character, one of the most unredeemable characters to in the
Mhm.
minds of most readers, I think. And yet, is he worse than the crippled god who actually prompted him to do the things he did in the first place? Where I feel like a lot of readers are more sympathetic toward the crippled god. Am I getting this wrong, or what are your thoughts on all this, guys?
Actually,
Just to
recently,
jump in very quickly. Sorry, Shay, on you go.
are you sure? You
Yeah,
you can
of
go.
course.
Or Okay, okay.
I was just going
Uh,
to add in very, very, very quickly. The thing that isn't there a moment where Felicin leaves the camp and then she suddenly kind of reverts back to normalcy, and it's only as she goes outside the camp that she realizes that she's kind of being messed with mentally, and then she obviously has to go back in. It's something, and then she goes back into the camp and she kind of gets subjected to the magical forces of the whirlwind.
Yeah.
So just to very quickly kind of add on to Philip's point, it does seem to be that there's a lot of people kind of getting, how can we put it, kind of cognitively skewed by the forces that are happening in that book. That's all I was going to say.
mm, I yeah, I think that there are elements of that. I actually was blanking on the name Bidithal until I got a little bit more of a description, but one thing that has stood out in my mind, even though I've mostly forgotten his character since my reading of House of Chains, is I was just talking to Sam from Samwise about this, about violence in Malazan, and not necessarily that Erickson didn't handle violence well, but that the fans are and I think this is intentional on Erickson's part of as we've seen with The God Is Not Willing, he calls out a lot of like what Karsa's done and makes fans look at what a character that's been forgiven in a new light with some of his victims. But one scene that comes to mind all the time is when he like rips off the genitals of another human being and forces him to like that like it's just so incredibly graphic of a way to take down a character. And it says a lot about Karsa and about the reader that we're able to fist pump when this is happening, even though he is incredibly vile. I wouldn't go as far as like, could Bidithal be redeemed? I don't know. I think at a certain point, he's too far gone for my own standards, but I think the like the way that his humanity is stripped away by Karsa and the way that the readers are like fervently frothing at the mouth, like, yes, witness, it does say a lot about like, well, and then look at who's doing it. Karsa Orlong is hella a hypocrite for that
Yeah.
because House of Chains
Yeah.
is vile. It's
He
vile.
himself is a as a rapist,
Yeah.
you know.
Mhm.
He murder raped in book 4. We all read it, like so it
Mhm.
just kind of feels a little bit like he just drew a line in the sand and said, if you touch this specific person, I will do this to you. And it's just kind of like virtue signaling from Karsa Orlong is crazy. Like, yes, dispatch him. Like he needs to die. He's out here assaulting these girls. I'm of the mind that he needed to go, but the way in which he was dispatched was like so incredibly graphic.
So I'm with you emotionally. I don't like Bidithal at all.
Right,
But
right.
why are we inconsistent in the sense that the crippled god gets a happy ending, right?
Hmm.
He's made whole at the end of all this, and he gets to go bye-bye, and we get this nice little book, you know, authored by him, and we feel bad for him. But he's the one who inspired Bidithal to do that to those girls. So why does he get a happy ending? And he does other things that are equally horrible all throughout the series. I mean, he does horrible things. He's behind most of the twisted, awful things that happen in Memories of Ice, for
The
example.
Panion Sear stuff, yeah.
Yeah, he's behind
Yeah.
all that. So why does he get a pass? Why is he redeemable and not Bidithal? And I struggle with this.
Another character to throw in the ring here is Rulad, who
Yeah.
goes through
Yeah.
something very similar. He is through circumstances that were okay, kind of at the start by his own sort of flaws, but we can all agree that what happens to Rulad does not deserve.
Yeah.
And he is manipulated, and he shifts mentally into a state of being through the manipulation of the crippled god. And when Rulad dies at the end of book 7, again by Karsa's hand, that's an interesting parallel there. Rulad's death is almost viewed as a mercy or maybe a tragedy of that character. That character is viewed as tragic. And
Yeah.
we're supposed to, I believe, have sympathy for Rulad at
Mhm.
the end of that book. Despite him being horrible towards the women in his life, being responsible for a lot of death, and becoming almost animalistic at the end in his brutality. There's a sympathy there that we don't have for Bidithal. So I
And he
thought I'd
was
just add in
manipulated by
that
the
kind of
crippled god
comparison as
as
well.
well. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah. So I think like I love that you brought up this moment. Or yeah, Bidithal's whole character, that whole thing. Everything with Fellis and Younger is my favorite part of House of Chains, and like every time I go back to that book, it gets better and better because I mean, obviously it's in one way it's a bit challenging to read a lot of that stuff, especially the no, we have to keep this quiet because we need his power kind of metaphor that's going on there, the really heartbreaking stuff. Um, or I don't know, not metaphor, but like analog to real world assault situations. Um, I love reading and kind of grappling with all of that, but I also like I love how you frame or like how you're talking about this because it reminds me of like interviews Erickson did years ago where he was talking a lot about moral relativism and how like at least in these books, I guess the case is being made that you can't go the total absolute forgiveness is for everyone because we can't understand anyone. Like
Right.
you have to be you have to accept that they're moral because you just can't be inside their mind. You can't go that whole like full tilt in
Right.
that direction.
Yeah, I don't think Erickson is a moral relativist in real
Right, right, right.
life.
And I think in a lot of ways it's important that this is book four we're talking about that comes right after book three, where we just have Icarium, not Icarium, Icovian,
Mhm.
doing this wonderful, compassionate gesture for the Amass. Um, and I think maybe some initial reaction to the what Covian feels about compassion and how the Redeemer kind of starts off in Toll the Hounds uh, is a bit of a moral relativist. And so having this Bidithal character to make all of the readers kind of have to redraw our like lines in our head of like what is the point that you can or can't cross that like does one thing or that makes us draw those lines and kind of helps us recognize, okay, yeah, so maybe we're not as on board with everything that Akovian was saying at the end of Memories of Ice.
Mm.
But then doing things like you're pointing out how we forgive the crippled God kind of by the end of the series, that makes us readjust and like redraw that line yet again. So it's like this constant like yeah, like reworking of what's redeemable, what's not. Yeah, super challenging, but I don't know, I love it. Yeah. And yeah, I just think about it like lines, like where's the point? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not
There's
entirely logical. There's an emotional, huge emotional component to that discussion, I think.
Mhm.
there's two other characters I've been thinking of, and forgive me if I'm slightly leading the conversation astray, as we've been kind of chatting. Um, I often think about Leoman of the Flails,
Uh-huh.
and the fact that he is, if we're going to do the lines, is pretty much as reprehensible as they come to some extent. He basically tortures a city and then now dances away, and he gets no justice. How do we end with him in, forgive me, is it Orb Scepter Throne? He basically is sitting chilling on a beach. And kind of just think, okay, well, I had my fun, and now I'm going to, I think, retire is basically what happens. Forgive, I could be a bit mistaken there, but the idea when I read this for the first time, I'm like, absolutely not. Ian C. Esselmont, bring that character back. I want to, like, if there's anyone else who deserves a Bidithal, and again, the language I'm just using there, deserving a Bidithal. Um, but I remember feeling deeply unhappy that this character did not see justice as I wanted him to. And I guess the reason I'm connecting this to the discussion is my personal inclination towards the punishment there of this character, who I believe didn't end up where they should have ended up. So that was going on in my head. And the other discussion, the other character we're coming up is this one's more about kind of reader kind of aesthetic response. Um, Malik Rel is an interesting person to throw in this kind of discussion of how we view the morality of characters and whether they are forgivable. Because Malik Rel,
Ugh.
everyone loves Malik. No, that's not true. Malik Rel is despicable all the way through the main 10. But I don't know if you've noticed in the conversations recently, people kind of say stuff along the lines of, yeah, but he's a great leader, isn't he? He's the best of the three who have led the Malazan Empire. And I feel like almost, and I maybe I'm just reading into things here. I feel like a lot of the Malazan fan base has become a lot more kind of appreciative of Malik Rail. This again, despite being a not for Shaye, but despite being a despicable human being, for some reason we're willing to cut Malik Rail a break as he goes on to kind of somewhat lead this empire effectively. So those are just the characters that we're dancing about as you guys were talking.
I have seen more of that about Malik lately online, like
Mm.
people saying, "Oh, well, I mean, is the Empire doing better under him or than it was under Lysine?" But obviously, kind of the stumbling block I have with him is he's such a master of this kind of genocidal propaganda against the Wiccans that
And
he
the
can't really
Gestal
get over that
stuff,
one. But um,
Yeah.
the
I no,
Gestal
I
stuff is
yeah,
like in Forge of the High Mage, I'm like,
yeah,
yep, nope, I was right. Like you're
yeah,
awful.
yeah, yeah. Oh, he's
Justice for
great in
Coltane.
Forge of the High Mage. Yeah.
One thing
I'm just
I've
thinking about
always
kind of we said about how when you go.
oh, one thing that I probably will not get clarity on, but I've wondered is you get the epigraphs where it mentions Grub is the first sword of the Malazan Empire. I don't know if after he was with the soldiers and some of the people that survived the events of Deadhouse Gates, like I don't see him taking orders from Malik Rel. So it kind of makes me wonder about where the Empire is going if Grub is going to be first sword. Like I don't really see him working for Malik Rel. I know he's only a child when we leave him at Crippled God, but I just can't imagine, especially with this sort of like father relationship he has with blanking on his
Um,
name.
Kenneth.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
And with some of the relationships he has with the Bone Hunters and their relationship with going into Seven Cities and the aftermath of the Chain of Dogs and kind of like the Justice for the Wiccan stuff, I wouldn't imagine Grub would be first sword to Malik Rel.
Yeah.
Is
I
he
mean,
not
maybe
described
with
also as like is he not described as like the first sword of the last days of the Malazan Empire or something as well in that epigraph? Just an interesting nuance. I don't know. I need to double check that. Pinch of
uh,
salt. But yeah. Sorry, Alex.
So
no,
you guys have not solved my moral quandary, I guess.
right.
We're not solving this one, are we? Yeah.
Well, okay, so I do, David, I love that you use the word justice because I think, I mean, that's obviously a really important word for the end of Book of the Fallen and definitely in Carcanos a bit too. But I, I think like hoping characters get their justice or whatever. I
Yeah.
think that is a lot of like Leoman. That's a lot of what like the satisfaction we get in like reading other series comes from. And that's really not what we get. We get that with Bidithal, of course. But I don't know that, and maybe we get it with I forget the name of the leader of the Four Corollas Sale that Hood just
Oh,
destroys.
yes, yes.
It starts with like an R or something. I don't know. But maybe that there is a sort of ironic, like, here's your justice, like, or he says something like that.
Mhm.
Um, or I've had enough of your justice. But yeah, maybe part of it is like reworking how we think about a satisfying conclusion to a villain story. Like, is it really that satisfying to see Bidithal's balls shoved in his mouth? I mean, at the time, yeah, we're like, you get him, Karsa, but by the end of the
Does
series,
that
do you
actually
still feel the
help any
same?
of the girls that Bidithal mutilated?
Right, right.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they all knew
And it's
about what was
interesting.
going on. Like they all knew. Um, yeah.
I don't think I've
I was
reached
just saying,
the
you're right. I was using it as justice, as I'll be honest, shorthand for my own emotional catharsis to reprehensible human beings. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think you're on the money.
Yeah, so what is justice? That's the question that's
Right.
being asked here, And is justice
Yeah.
even real? You know,
Right, right.
we have this imagined social agreement about justice, but in reality, it's incredibly inconsistent.
Yeah.
And it depends on your social status and a host of other factors, what kind of justice you get in most societies. So it's not maybe the point is there's no real like platonic perfect form of justice that
Right,
we
right,
can achieve
right.
here, right? That it's just something we talk about, but really it's more of an emotional want that we have to see something happen, something bad happen to someone that we don't like.
Right.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of this as well just comes down to how these characters are represented on the page. I mean, we all dislike Bidithal, and he is portrayed as this kind of ugly, nasty older man. And I'm trying to think of someone who maybe we're more forgiving of, who would probably, you know what, go to Game of Thrones for a minute. Jaime Lannister is a
Hmm.
particularly
Yeah.
vile human being,
Yeah.
but he is portrayed as handsome and charming and
Right.
witty,
Right.
and so he gets away with it. I mean, ultimately, that's part of it as well as our own response to the person we see in front of us.
Right.
Something to be wary
When
of as well.
when
One
he's
I never
named,
see. Oh, sorry.
I just quickly, I was gonna say when Jamie is maimed, that's when we start to be behind him more.
Right.
He
Mhm.
becomes
Crippled.
he becomes a different kind of character, which yeah, crippled essentially. Yeah. So I think that that's a factor there that it humanizes him somehow, that it humbles him
Mhm.
in a way that makes him more relatable. But yeah, we're all most of people are on Team Jamie by the time they get to that point in that series. But yeah,
Mhm.
sorry, what were you gonna say?
I was gonna say, well, to bring it back to Malazan, a similar situation is like one character I never see criticized is Dancer, but I mean the way he uses Absolar is pretty heinous, and
Horrible.
he is universally thought of as one of the most like likable characters in Malazan. Like, and
Because he feels
especially
bad about it later on.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
exactly, but
Yeah.
you, I
There's
mean,
a
you low
cry.
key ruined her life.
He
Like,
had
yes,
to
she becomes a
think.
badass
Yeah.
warrior, but she didn't consent to that.
That is actually even you could argue a worse form of rape, you know.
Right. Right. I mean, Udanas with Saren, that sort of
Yeah.
thing happens for a split second, and it's atrocious. Like, and because Udanas explains it in such a clear way, and I don't know about you guys, but I love the way that
Yeah.
Udanas thinks about the world, and so being in
Yep.
his mind, it's like, oh well, obviously that's horrible. But in Gardens of the Moon, I guess the real horror of it didn't really sink in until much later. Like, yeah,
Yeah, so why
Yeah.
does Dancer why does Cotillion get a pass?
right,
Right? Why do we laugh at the hijinks of Kellanved
right.
when he's responsible for the deaths of millions and the acquisition by a aggressive empire of innocent cultures, the destruction of many of them. We
Enslavement
go like,
of,
ha
yeah,
ha ha, he's so funny.
yeah,
Uh, so yeah, it's interesting. Our responses when it comes to morality and our sense of justice seems to be much more of an emotional factor
yeah,
than actually a rational one.
yeah.
Yes.
Um, Sorry, I didn't ask David you this specifically, but would both of you like to share any more about tools or resources that you relied on during your reading process? Or
First time I read it, I didn't rely on anything. I was just all by myself, which I kind of recommend
oh,
in a way.
yeah,
Uh,
Hmm.
Second time I had this random guy named AP Canavan. So
okay, yeah. And yeah, David, I know you talked about the Tor reread, but were there any other things or
I mean, at the time I read it, Tor Reread was the main one, and then there was also like a Facebook community that was active, and there was the Stephen Erickson's forum, which I'm not sure if it's still open or not, but where I went to. I would say that the forum and stuff has maybe been replaced by the wiki and the Reddit. The Reddit, I did some research a couple of months ago, has exploded, particularly since COVID. I think there's like a six-fold increase in the number of members
oh,
of the Malazan community, which is wonderful. And although I would totally agree with Philip, and based on my own experience, reading it in isolation, or not in isolation, maybe is the wrong way of putting it, but reading it by yourself, um, I guess this wonderful experience. It's also very nice to have that what would you call it, headquarters, that digital headquarters, where if you really feel like you need something to understand to continue, if you're kind of losing the thread, that's there too.
oh, thank you.
One thing I think is
Yeah.
interesting about like the booktube stratosphere is like I feel like, well, I don't want to speak for everyone here, but most of us read these books prior to it being like the big massive booktube darling that it is now.
Yeah,
And it's like impossible to go into these books without that bias, without like even if you're not looking for resources to help you out with it, it's kind of like you can't really be on our section of the internet without hearing a lot of perspectives on Malazan. So that
Mm.
I feel I'm grateful that I was able to find it before it became, like the level it is now, to where it's very difficult to like find any Malazan content that doesn't, in some way affect your reading of the rest of the
right.
series.
Okay. Any more comments on Philip's thing or on tools and resources before we move on to the last confusing storyline? Okay.
Hmm.
So what I'm going with today is the Calce-rooted Icarium ghost and all of his companions' story from Dust of Dreams. Especially the first time I read it, I didn't even have, because I was doing that bouncing back and forth thing, I didn't even have a clear idea of which of the named characters that he gives us I had already known before, like Rautos and Taxilian, much less the four or five that we don't know who they are, or at least we start off not knowing who they are. There's still some I've never puzzled out who some of them are. Presumably people who died near the end of Reaper's Gale. But and yeah, just like I think what makes that story so confusing on top of everything is you have all these different perspectives and just the format of the book. You have the page breaks where it's jumping point of view to point of view, even though we're all still kind of in this omniscient ghost point of view, that comes out more and more as those sections go along. And then it's not like they're just walking through like a fantasy town, the setting is confusing as well because it's this wildly science fictional skykeep, and they're getting it working again. And there is a Kachane Shamal there. Then someone starts coming through, killing people. The actual like literally what's happening, page by page. That's made more and more sense each time I've read it, but still trying to figure out who some of these souls are. I still don't know. And yeah, and I don't think there's anything like that story in the whole series, and I love it for that. Like it's easily one of my favorite sections. But yeah, thoughts on Icarium's ghost and all those people.
That was the other one I had picked, by the way.
Okay.
That was my second one that I didn't say.
It's confusing and deliberately so and brilliant. I agree with you. It's a great section. And I don't think I could name all the ghosts, but enough of them where I realize what kind of has happened here, right?
Right.
That that Icarium is these multiple personalities within him now. And it's interesting because for a long ways, the first time I read it, I actually thought they were just kind of like probably most, like they were just right alongside him and that
Right,
they're
right.
all together in this little mini quest group in the middle of this, encountering this bizarre, abandoned or not quite entirely abandoned, complex. So yeah, it was cool when I realized, oh, that's all coming out of his head there.
Yeah.
Whoa. Um, and at the same time, I think it's really cool where it takes that character, Icarium, um, where it takes him in his specific journey and his particular form of madness.
Mhm.
And so, yeah, it's incredibly well done. I won't say I understand it like you. I would never say, "Well, I know exactly who that is and that is," but yeah, there's got to be a couple of those that I don't know. They're just random people who happen to
Right,
be
right.
around at that moment when that explosion happens. At the end of Reaper's Gale.
Yeah.
Um, so we don't. There's no reason why we would have known them, I suppose, right? They
Right,
just
right.
had to be in the wrong place at the wrong
Right.
time. So now they're hitching a ride with Icarium. So, but yeah, no, really cool part. And initially totally got me and took me. I think I understood it on the first read, but not for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I had to visit the Malazan forum, and there was one user, Aptorian, that like mapped it out completely.
Okay.
I actually had it pulled up because that was my second one that I
Okay.
was gonna go with, but uh, I actually don't know if I got it the first time around. That was one of the few instances where I did have to like go and do some research, not necessarily like who the ghosts were, but like what was going on, like more broad spectrum, like what am I actually looking at? And then also like between the ending of Reaper's Gale and that section within Dust of Dreams, I had read Stonewielder, Toll the
Yeah.
Hounds, Orb
Yeah.
Scepter Throne. So by the time I came back around, I remembered the names, but I didn't necessarily remember the characters. I'm talking about like Robin, like the familiar ones. I'm like, was that the guy that was with Icarium?
Right, right.
And I it was because I had that distance between Reaper's Gale and Dust of Dreams that added to like the overall confusion because I wasn't even like super clear on my memory of like the big explosion in Lether that like led to all this happening. So I was like, what's going on?
Yeah.
So that was probably the one I needed the most resources for personally.
Okay.
I can't believe you were all confused by this section. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, yeah, for me as well. For me, I found it difficult for the reasons that you were all articulating, and then obviously at the end, like, okay, it's a spaceship now. I
Right,
was like
right.
this. Okay, we've got like, and it's. I think Alex, you said it's unlike what has come before. I mean, you can kind of see the points looking back at how this comes together, but there is a thing of like, what is happening here? But I guess I'd add in, so I'd accord with everything everyone was saying. I was being flippant, and I do agree that it's a challenging section that I definitely didn't entirely get the first time or even the second time. But a couple of things that I think it does that are really interesting. I'll give you three, if I can remember three things in my brain at the same time. The first one is I love how visual it is. And
Mhm.
actually, is it the subpress edition of Dust of Dreams? I think has it as its cover or one of the art pieces on the inside, and it's gorgeous. And so even though I'm not quite sure what's happening from scene to scene, I actually still find that I have a very clear picture in my mind of what's going on. Does that make sense? Which kind of helps solve some of that ambiguity.
Yeah.
The second reason I still really appreciate it and do get some meaning from it is that I find it, although again from a narrative or a plot perspective, quite tricky. Thematically, it makes a lot of sense what's going on because Dust of Dreams, it's this journey. There's meditation upon what's happening and the purpose of what's going on, just to name a couple of things. Obviously, themes of memory and time and people who've come before. All of this is very much in accordance with books 9 and 10 of the Malazan Book of the Fallen and the series as a whole, and the whole kind of corpus of Malazan as a whole. So I really enjoyed that aspect to it. Again, even not having a Scooby, what was going on. But the third reason I also really like that sequence is the slight window it gives us into Icarium. Because I mean, Erickson has said that he tried originally to write Animander Rake from Animander's
Right, right.
perspective, and he found it too difficult. How do you get inside the mind of someone who has experienced so much with such longevity? And I quite like that he approaches this with Icarium from a slightly different point of view. Um, and we obviously don't get to see like an Anamander and Icarium are hugely different characters, but they both have that through line where they're extremely long lived and they have had serious repercussions on the world that they are standing in. Obviously, you have this issue with Icarium that he has this. Ironically, I can't remember the name for it.
Amnesia.
Like amnesia. I was going to say nostalgia. He has this amnesia that makes it a little bit easier, I guess, to get into his POV. But I do like the whispers, and as Philip says, of his madness. But you do get kind of whispers of that longevity throughout the sequence. So although I don't understand it, and I'll be totally honest, I'm still not sure I totally understand it. There are enough kind of bits in it that I still find it a very fruitful and rewarding experience. Almost the most experimental of the Malazan Book of the Fallen stuff.
I think if Erickson had wanted to make it really super obvious from the beginning, he could have had Icarium talk a big glob of phlegm onto his hand and fix his hair with it, you know?
Right, right.
Then we would have known. Then we
Right.
would have known, right?
Yeah,
Tarlock Veed's in there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
Watch out.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Every time that sequence happens, I just go, "Ugh."
yeah.
Yeah, which is the point, isn't it?
And then, I mean, even confusing things a little more is just the physical dimension of things with how that wraps up with how, so, okay, so Featherwitch has the Errant's eye, and she was drowned, and so she's the breath character in the ghost thing. And so then when the Calc-rooted Skykeep comes to battle the other Skykeeps and gets turned into a finesse, they use the eye that she had, but just the fact that there's no real like I guess a connection to a physical reality because it's all kind of up here in gods and mysterious powers and things. Um, and then correct me if I'm wrong, but like then the finesse, like it's sort of like the stone of the ground rises up into this tower that catches the sky keep, but it also resembles a giant eyeball or something, or it resembles the errant's eye. I don't know if I have that right or not.
I'm
But
fuzzy on it now, I'll be honest.
I
The
blanked
details of
on
the ending.
everything you just said. I
okay,
need
sure.
a reread.
I mean, I'm remembering the gist of it. I can't remember if it took the form of an eye though.
Okay. I might have just been thinking that like, oh, wouldn't that be funny? Or
I'm not
wouldn't
saying you're wrong either, but yeah.
but yeah, I think I
Maybe
love
this was,
yeah. I love the
I say maybe
visual.
this is the answer to when, sorry, Alex.
No, you go. You go.
I was just going to say that maybe this is the answer to why, Malazan is so evergreen. Just going back to that conversation with Steven Erickson, it's because we keep forgetting stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I'm the
Um,
only one here who hasn't reread it, and I feel that at this moment as you're describing that scene, I'm like, like I haven't reread all 10 books of the Fallen, so th that segment from Dust of Dreams is incredibly hazy. The more detail you give to it, I'm just like, what?
but yeah, no, I mean, I think part of the joy of this is like, or part of the fun, is that even after rereads, there's stuff we don't know, and like or maybe there's stuff that after the first read, it's like, oh yeah, I know what happened there, but then when we reread it, we say, wait, no, that's a lot more complicated than I thought it was. What, like,
Yeah.
yeah, but yeah, I love the challenging, confusing kind of aspects of the series, um, and specifically this storyline and this finesse. And I mean, we could talk about finesse in the Azath houses as well. I think those, especially End of Gardens of the Moon on a first read, those trip people up a bit, including myself.
Or
Yeah,
the Zathanai in Carcanis.
yeah, yeah.
What?
Or even the builder in Toll the Hounds. I'm still like, what was that? They
Oh
they, they
yeah,
fell
yeah.
down a well. Yeah. Lots
One
of lots of
thing,
stuff.
really quick side tangent. I love how the elder gods that you think of in Malazan Book of the Fallen are not one to one of like what the Azathanai are in Carcanis. Like when
Right.
you find out that he's I forget his name, the guy with the big hammer.
Kaladin Brood. Yeah.
When you find Kaladin Broods in Azathanai, Night Chills in Azathanai, and
Right.
these people were
Yes.
much more like you view them as mortals or more, down to earth than someone say like Kroll, and you
Right.
find out that they're like the same breed. I was like, what? And then some that you would think are anyway, that was just my weird sign tangent.
Yeah. No, yeah. I think
Another like one more side tangent, if you don't mind me just
yeah,
jumping
yeah. Oh
in.
yeah, yeah.
Is one thing that I always admire about both Esselmont and Erickson's writing, both, is that when you have these moments of kind of challenge or difficulty or whatever word you want to use, trickiness, it's very often punctuated by moments where you could get to kind of sit back and laugh and realize that like there'll be a moment of joy or levity or lightness that allows kind of it's almost like Erickson or Esselmont is kind of jumping in and going, listen, it's okay, you're doing okay. So I'm thinking of the Crippled God when they're almost at the end of the glass desert and things are getting very thorny, but also confusing. And then you have this letter. One of my favorite moments in the whole
Yeah.
series is the letter from Bidithal Bedic that just comes in and just says, "Dear brother, have you slept with her yet?" And one of my favorite scenes. But the reason I love it so much is not just for what the scene is doing, but because it comes in this section that is just bristling with question marks. And I think both authors are extremely skilled at giving you those moments of like you're doing okay.
Yeah.
It's gonna be fine. Yeah,
I love
that's
that
all I was gonna say.
observation. I love that observation, David. That's great. Yeah.
Thank you.
I like the I really like this idea, like the series encourages the us to sit back and say it's okay to be confused. It's okay to not have the answers. I think maybe that's not to get too broad, but maybe that's a problem with the modern world, just people unwilling to admit when they don't understand things or when they're wrong or confused. And so hopefully a conversation like this kind of is an example of not that.
Mhm.
Yeah, that these are things that we still struggle with and yeah,
Well,
trying to find.
it's easier to have clarity, to have right and wrong, black and white. Our labels that we like to stick on things
Right, right.
so that we give ourselves the illusion that we understand them, right? Because, oh, you're this, boom, and then I've categorized you, and I
Right.
refuse to recognize your complexity thereafter, right? So this is a series that challenges that and makes people uncomfortable because of it,
Yeah.
and I love it for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'll real quick just say I don't want to keep you guys here too much longer. But some of the resources, tools, stuff that I relied on didn't have much. Had the Reddit, but back in 2015, 2016, it wasn't that big of a community. And then um, yeah, then I think with rereads and stuff, that's where I started to really like find Iskar Jarek's YouTube channel and Ruth and Bad, and then of course Philip U and AP started around that time as well. That all really helped. Right now, what I'm loving just is like helping as a refresher, kind of two things. Right now, I'm going back through the series on audiobook just during my drives, just because it's like, oh, keep some of those details fresh in my mind and I might just keep that on a pretty continuous loop for who knows the rest of my life. I don't know. Because I struggle to listen to a book on audio for the first time, but if I've read it, maybe reread it, then I can focus more. I don't worry that I'm missing as
I'm the
much.
same.
So yeah, audio I think it's really helping me out on these rereads. And then also the DLC feedback book club. They're doing a read of Malazan right now. I don't know if you guys are familiar with their read along type thing. Did I say reread or read along? They're doing a read along, and they're both like so kind of fresh to the series and so excited and so they just bring such a wonderful energy to their analysis and of all of the like read along types of things that are out there, it's easily one of my favorites because they like at the end of a video they have their theories and maybe they get some character names wrong and they get some theories wrong and this stuff is wildly off, but like that's kind of what's exciting. Like that's good because I think it puts me more back in my shoes when I first read the series than anything else. So I'd recommend that to you guys if you're interested. I'll link that stuff below. I'll try to link all the different channels and things we mentioned below just for anyone curious. Um,
You know, there's a joy in watching people experience it for the first time.
yeah.
And I think often side tangent, I do apologize. I think often people expect when you're having someone read something you love for the first time, you want them to be gushingly positive. I don't think that's true. I think when you see someone experience, for example, Malazan for the first time, it's just nice to see their genuine, authentic reactions. And so I love this idea of kind of following a couple of first timers
Yeah.
going through it. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything to add before we close out the show?
Just thank you for
I appreciate
organizing,
you all.
Alex. Yeah, and great
Yeah.
chatting with the three of you.
Oh, thank you all so much
Yeah.
for joining me today. I had so much fun. And thank you everyone for watching. Please, comment down below what parts of the series you found most confusing, or your thoughts on any of the different sections that we all talked about today. Thanks everyone. Have a great day. Bye.
Are we still